Welcome to Even the Dog Has ADHD, because apples don't fall far from trees and it's never just one. Today's episode speaks to anyone trying to make sense of life when neurodivergence runs through both the adults and the children in the home. I'm joined today by Helen, a careers advisor with over 20 years experience, as we explore the reality of the impact of school refusal, the emotional labor of advocating for your child, and the truth that building a career that actually fits your life isn't a simple switch from one thing to another. It's a journey of finding what works now. In the first half of this episode, we explore Helen's own story of late diagnosis, meeting menopause, lockdown, unraveling routines. And then, from about 36 minutes into this episode, we'll unpack how Helen works in supporting parents in their own career. This is about working with the wiring you have and the skills that you've gathered along the way. Helen has lived all of this herself before reshaping her work with the parents she supports navigating the same crossroads in their lives. Her honesty is grounding, and her insights around burnout and family life and career change will resonate with so many of us. Let's dive in.
Hi, Diana. So happy to be invited. Thank you so much for reaching out.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you here and to keep in touch and see all the adventures that you share on LinkedIn about your journey, not just in the work you do, which I'd love you to share and introduce yourself on, but also your lived experience with your own family.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I suppose my journey was, I was very interested in your podcast as soon as you reached out because I was only diagnosed myself. I'm 52 now. I was only diagnosed with ADHD 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That was on the back of discovering and going on a journey really with my youngest's neurodivergence. So he started struggling in school, and at the time I'd been working as a careers advisor in high schools with a lot of young people that are neurodivergent, which I know that we'll talk about on a future podcast, won't we, Diana? But so I won't say too much about that now, but I started to spot signs in my youngest, who was in year one back in 2020. So during the first lockdown, for me, is where kind of everything seemed to just come unstuck for me. So I didn't know that I was in perimenopause. I didn't know I had ADHD, and I was working at the time. So it's prior to I've got myself in a bit of a muddle. Prior to my work in schools, I was working as a university careers advisor, and we went into lockdown, and I suddenly had to move my job to the evenings.
Yeah.
So I was online. I was seeing students on Zoom. Zoom was really new to everybody then, so I was in these, careers guidance appointments, 8 till 9 p.m, and then coming off Zoom and writing up my reports. And then I was getting up in the morning and trying to homeschool my children. I have two children, two boys. They were in year one and year three at the time. My youngest was really struggling with the home learning, and I was struggling because suddenly I was put in this position of having to mediate what the school was sending. So the school was sending all of this online learning, and they were throwing all this stuff at us. And I was having to say, right, you need to sit down and do this big write, which was, a paragraph of writing, which I could see how much my son was struggling with this. And I was getting really frustrated. I'm not a teacher, and I was just really struggling with all of it. So I ended up getting put to the point where I had burnout. And I probably didn't know that's what it was at the time, but I went into burnout. And at the same time, in around June, so pretty much 5 years ago, the opportunity very luckily for me, for voluntary redundancy came up in my university job. And I've been in higher education for about 20 years, really long time, working as a, you know, in career services, as a careers advisor, helping young people. And I didn't know, not really probably what you should be doing as a careers advisor, but I didn't know what I was going to do at that point. So I had no plan. And I took the voluntary redundancy. I was lucky that there was a generous package there for me. And after taking some time out to recover from the burnout, to help my son through that difficult period as we were sort of trying to figure out what was happening with the pandemic, I then started to just kind of explore the flexible job landscape, I suppose. Bear in mind, at this time, I still didn't know I had ADHD. My son didn't have any kind of diagnosis of anything. And then obviously went back into school. Struggles for him continued. And I needed something more flexible to fit around my family. And, you know, my dad has always had his own business, always run his own business, but I kind of felt like that wasn't for me. But I started to think, well, what else could I do here? So for some time, I did a mix of different things. So one thing I did, which again I will talk a little more detail about next time, is I started to work as a contract careers advisor in high schools. So I was helping. So my job basically was to help 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, young people in year 10 and year 11 in mostly mainstream secondary schools, but also pupil referral unit, special school, to figure out what they were going to do after school. So look at their post-16 options. So like I say, I won't go into that in detail. There's an awful lot to talk about there, and how, you know, and you know, children who didn't fit into that system, and especially neurodivergent young people. But I did find that was tricky because obviously working in education, there isn't much flexibility for people that are working in education. So if I found that obviously I had to be in school at a particular time, I had a schedule of appointments, and there wasn't much flex there for me when my own child was struggling to get into school, or if he was poorly, has a lot of health difficulties. I just needed something a little bit more flexible there. So I also did some online freelancing, and I used some freelancer platforms like Fiverr. I did careers guidance on Fiverr, and I was working with, you know, it's like executives in New York. I had to figure out different time zones because it's an international marketplace. So I was delivering online careers guidance. I was delivering practice interviews, doing, you know, CV reviews, CV writes, and things like that. And then I came to the point where I started to think about setting up my own business, but on a which we can come on to, can't we? But you know, on a personal note, I with my son, who was struggling in school, we were really starting to notice signs of what I thought was ADHD from my experience of working with young people with ADHD in high schools as we went through that period after the first lockdown. And I pushed hard to get a referral in school. It was really challenging. There wasn't a Senko in school at the time.
Wow.
So it all took a really long time.
Yeah.
In the meantime, as his referral was going through school and CAMS and what I call the tortoise route, sorry, but it's the tortoise route. It's even worse now. I thought, hang on a minute, I'm seeing a lot of what he's struggling with in myself. And I know that this is a journey that so many parents have been down. So I was just noticing how he would get so easily distracted when he was on a Zoom call with school, when we were in that lockdown period, I would notice how he would be a little impulsive and interrupt or go off on a tangent and, talk a little bit too long, how we'd sit sort of awkwardly. I've got my legs crossed here right now. I'm not sitting properly on my seat.
I'm bouncing mine.
Are you? Yeah. So there were a lot of things, and I kind of thought, I would just wonder. And I started to look into it. I also found that I was really struggling with my work. So when I was working in schools, I would have to write reports, and reports for me are just such a joy killer. I love speaking to people. I love doing things like this, but the report side of it. So I had to, whenever I had a meeting with a student, I had to write up what's called a career action plan for that student. It is important. Sometimes they're read, sometimes they're not, and they go home to parents. And I know that sometimes parents really value those. So I wanted to do a really good job.
Yeah.
But they were taking me so long. So I'd end up staying in schools when I was working in schools, for like a couple of hours after I should have finished, just writing up the reports from the day and sending them, and doing the follow-ups that I needed to do. And I knew it was taking a lot longer than my colleagues who were working for the same agency, because we'd be on this WhatsApp chat. So it was really, it was, I knew that I was different. And I think in the past what I'd done, I'd always known that I'd struggled with these things, but I kind of would always try and fix things, so I would kind of, all right, let's get a book on procrastination. So it's a joke with my partner that, I'm like a self-help guru. I'm always trying to fix myself with things. So I think what became more difficult, and again, this is a journey I know a lot of people have been on, is that with perimenopause, everything got more challenging. So once I realised that I was in perimenopause, I really saw how that exacerbated my ADHD, and it became more difficult to concentrate, and everything was taking longer, and I had the brain fog, and all of that was very, very difficult. I went on HRT. That has helped quite a bit. But yeah, I would say that I probably had a lot of coping mechanisms with my ADHD, which meant that went on the, under the radar for most of my life.
Yeah.
When life became more complex, having children that struggled to go to school, having neurodivergent children as well, just the complexity of life, I would say, now, meant that the things that I put in place, where I'd been maybe like this swan, sort of frantically like swimming underwater, doing this, and looking like I had it all sorted, I had it all under control, that sort of fell apart really at that period in that first lockdown. And I've just been kind of going through this process for me of trying to figure out myself and how I manage, myself and my ADHD and where I'm at, and being true to myself, which is why, my business is called True to You Careers. But also how to manage the whole work side of things, given the sort of family situation that we're in.
Yeah. And you very briefly said, oh yeah, I reached burnout.
Yeah.
And burnout is huge, and it takes a while to come out of that. And it's your whole system, isn't it? It's your whole nervous system. It's your emotions. It's like my world. It's just like you say, it works until it doesn't work. And often it's either in a relationship where there's that mirroring going on and you can't hide from yourself, or if you work through that, when children arrive, that brings even more stuff up within you, often unresolved stuff with your own childhood as well. And as a parent, reverting to type from, even though you may not want to, may desire to do things differently. And like when we connected, and like I said before we started recording, like, so all of that I think is really important for people to hear the path that you have walked. And I'm sure people or whoever is listening right now who's looking for support in being able to work and to earn money, to still be able to parent, just how do you get from burnout,
Mm.
understanding that you're in perimenopause and just that turn the volume up on ADHD, that's where you are. But where you are now, where I met you, was like, oh my goodness, there is this person right here supporting parents who are trying to hold a job down and still parent their neurodivergent children. Like, career is still important. And there's this, certainly in my journey, there were times where I felt, I would say into school, I am turning myself inside out for my child. I don't know what else to do. And the other line, and the kind of response that you get from doctors, teachers, Senkos, all sorts of people is, you're the expert in your child. And I'm like, I am not a clinical psychologist. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to do the best I can.
Mm.
But talk to me a bit more, because that's huge what you experience. And you know, all of us that lived through lockdown and
Yeah.
trying to homeschool and recognizing that there's something else going on.
Yeah.
And I suspect there were a number of people, maybe it was hidden, the burnout, because
Yeah.
even post lockdown, a lot of us were able to still work from home, maybe
Yes.
recovering in away from the office. And then, you know, you need to come in 2 days, minimum 3 days, and people are upping. And we're in 2020, halfway through 2025 now. And the sense that I get is people are only just beginning to feel ready to meet in person. Like, we've been doing it, but there's almost like this desire to connect face to face again.
Yeah.
And that's 5 years. It's taken sort of time. So whether you're neurodivergent or not, I think society is still recovering a little bit from it.
Mm.
So tell me more, that journey from where you were
Mhm. Mhm.
to taking all that skills, and you were in schools, like you say, we'll chat separately about
Yeah.
that. But the piece around your career, your work, the things that you do, the job you may well love, not just to get money, that is becoming something you don't love anymore because it's just too much. Talk to me about how you got to the point where you set up what you do now from burnout.
An interesting one, actually, because, and I don't talk about this very much, Diana, but when I left, I didn't know. I did a lot of deep digging during that burnout.
Yeah,
I, for myself, because I've always been, and I think it probably is a little bit of a neurodivergent thing as well, that I can't do something unless I feel really passionate about it.
yeah,
Yeah, like I have to really believe in it. I have to really care about it. And I got to the point where I thought I'd lost that with the, I mean, I've been in the careers world for a long time, and I love helping people. It mattered so much to me. And I kind of thought, I don't want to do this anymore. Um, so what happened was I actually applied for, well, I mean, I didn't know I was in burnout, but a bit silly, really. I took the voluntary redundancy and then straight away applied for exactly the same job at a different university. I did. And then we went on holiday, we went camping, and when we were on camping, I had an email through on my phone saying I've been invited for an interview for this job,
mm-hmm.
another careers advisor job at another university, same job basically.
Mm.
I just kind of thought, why am I looking at this? I'm just doing it because I feel like I should do it, because that's what I've always done and that's who I am. And, career
Yeah.
is so bound up in identity, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
something I talk to my clients a lot about as well. And, that identity piece, and it goes really deep.
Really
So I
does.
talk, because we're on holiday, and when you go on holiday and you sort of, you're a bit separate from things, aren't you? And you have that different perspective.
Yeah.
So we were sort of, there, and I said to my husband, I don't think I want to do this. I don't think I want to do this. And he said, well, don't then. You have this little buffer. He said, I think you need to take a break. And I said, okay. And I pulled out the interview at that point. And then after that, I decided in my head, I drew a line under my past as a careers advisor. I kind of thought, I didn't want to do this anymore. At the same time, I was doing a couple of other things. So actually, before I started, all the work in schools and all the things I've just been talking about there. I did an online party on Zoom for my son, which was spy themed, and it drew on a sort of creative side that I have that wasn't really fully explored or utilized in my previous career. It was a bit, because I think I've always done my job in quite a creative way. But I developed all of it, this kind of fun party pack that we then did a doorstop drop of all these kind of spy themed party activities, and we dropped them off, and then we had the party on Zoom. And I actually toyed with and started to look at selling those party packs online. And because we were in that period that you were talking about where everything was online, right? It was that perfect period where Zoom is new to everybody, and it's a bit exciting and a bit scary and not fun, but at the same time everybody's on it and we're all doing it. So I did that for a while, and yeah, it is something I don't talk about very much, because actually I had that moment of thinking, I don't feel like I want to do this careers thing anymore.
Yeah.
We met on LinkedIn, right, a few months ago. Well, I spent 4.5 years off LinkedIn completely. Now, I used to train fellow careers practitioners on LinkedIn. I did training for my professional body. I set up a LinkedIn academy with some colleagues for students, training students on LinkedIn at university, all of that. And I just thought, I don't want anything to do with that world anymore. I'm done. So yeah, so I did that probably for the first, after coming out of the burnout. I was going through a period of just thinking, I'm going to do something completely different. But in hindsight, I think it was maybe part of the burnout. Actually, it was part of feeling like I'm burnt out with what I did, but it was the structure of the job rather than the work itself. Like, the work itself for me, I think, has always been meaningful, but there were the structure of the job didn't work for me. And it was really interesting because, and I think, again, I see this in my own clients that who maybe have worked in the past, had to take a career break, perhaps because of their family situation, because of burnout, things like perimenopause, lots of things colliding, very similar to me. They've taken a career break. They're thinking about, right, I need to go back to work. But in the meantime, they've had a diagnosis, or they've realized, it may be a realization, it may not be a formal diagnosis, of neurodivergence. It may be, they've discovered they're autistic or they have ADHD. And they're thinking, I can't go back to the work that I did. Yeah. So that work that I did didn't suit me. Things like, which I've written about, the open plan office, right? Working in an open plan office. It never worked for me, Diana. It never did. But I didn't know, and I was just fighting myself over it because I was looking around, looking at all these people working in an open plan office and thinking, well, it's working well for them. Why can't I do it?
I'm sure that resonates for so many people, particularly sound sensitive or light sensitive, smell sensitive.
Exactly.
Because when your senses are really heightened, and you're having to disconnect from those in order to focus, this is working even harder.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just saying the other day, it was yesterday, to this lovely human that's staying with us at the moment, a young person, we were talking about my son's additional needs with the sound sensitivity at times, or just other, like how you support in school, or when it all just becomes too much and you just need a day at home to reset, particularly as you get towards the end of term. And I said, but if you're more sensitive to neurodivergent needs, you're just kinder to everybody else. So if you're more sensitive to people's sensory needs in an open plan, it's not just neurodivergent people that benefit from it. It's
Exactly.
everybody in that
Yeah.
space that benefits from more thoughtfulness of others and more consideration of others. Like,
Yeah.
I can think of, I'm sure it will resonate for people in open plan, smelly reheated food
Yes.
in an open plan office, particularly fish.
Well, I'm vegetarian, so that would be
No,
just.
I'm vegetarian too, but
Are you? Are you?
yeah, and that
Yeah.
was sort of by accident, but that's a story for another time. But
Oh. Well,
but
yeah.
but yeah, like you're saying that, and I'm sure it will be resonating for people who have reached the point they've come out of like 20-30 year career because they've had to,
Yeah.
whether it's from burnout or it's just untenable to be constantly going to school to pick up the child, to
Exactly.
go in late because you need to give your child additional support.
Yeah,
Like, it's
leaving early because they've been called, right? Come and pick them up. Yeah.
like, yeah, and it just becomes exceptionally stressful. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So back to your
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. So I'll continue on from there. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, realizing that kind of form of work where I'm in a large organization. The other thing that I really struggled with, I would say, is being in a very hierarchical organization.
Mm.
And I think I'm on the pathway as well to an autism assessment. So through Right to Choose, and I have this real sensitivity about people being in positions of authority that are not necessarily earned. So I feel like I'm quite meritocratic, but I treat people as people, basically, and human beings. Everybody to me is a human being. I don't care if you're the prime minister. I don't care if a 15-year-old in a school uniform sitting in front of me. You are a
You are a
human being
human
and you
being.
have the same value.
Gosh, that resonates so much, Helen. So do you think that is to do with being autistic, to see like, but you're a person and you are a person? I thought it was to do with
Yeah.
my upbringing.
Really? Well,
I
it's possible, but there is. I have read into this a little bit, and and speaking to other autistic people, it's something that people share. I think that feeling,
Wow.
and it was something that for me, it's just obvious. But I've
Yeah.
never been interested in celebrities. I've never cared too much about that. Celebrity for celebrity's sake. I think if someone is a fantastic singer, if they're a fantastic
Mm.
performer or a writer, brilliant.
Yeah.
But I don't care about the celebrity of it, if you see what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
because somebody's earning a lot of money, or just because somebody's has a very high
So
profile, I
funny,
don't care.
because where I go to with all of that is everybody goes to the toilet, and everyone's kids
There we go.
can be a challenge. It doesn't matter who you are. I remember going to see, it was at the English National Opera,
Yeah.
and they put on this opera called the Scratch and Sniff Opera, where you had a program, and every time that a rabbit would walk out with a number, and you would scratch the number and sniff it. And
Oh,
I can't even remember the title of it, but it was a scratch and sniff opera. And in the break, I remember seeing Jules Holland. I was like, oh, wow, I know who he is.
yeah.
He had the stressed parent face on. And
Yeah.
I was like, see, like we're all, but I think this kind of separation with celebrity
Yeah.
is less I don't know, maybe with social media and people sort of behind
Mm,
the scenes. And I
yeah,
love Pamela, I can't pronounce her name, Plamone Faith. Pam,
yeah, Paloma Faith, yeah.
I love watching her podcast, and it just feels she does it in her home, and
Yeah,
she just feels very relatable as a human being.
yeah,
But
yeah.
so interesting.
So yeah, so actually, I mean, I was just talking about really
Yeah.
universities are very large, very hierarchical, bureaucratic organizations. And I didn't have the freedom in that type of organization to be myself, to have an impact, to, um, it was difficult work for me working in that type of organization. So again, when I work with um, parents, I talk quite a lot, and even young people as well, about the sort of cultural fit.
Oh,
The type of organization you work in if you're going to be employed is really, really important. You can be doing the same job, but in the wrong place, it can not feel right. And the same goes for the flexibility side of it as well. So really for me, very easily, that university could have offered me a lot more flexible working, because
mm,
you only need to look at lockdown, and everybody talks about this, to see how suddenly it's very possible to work from home. Suddenly organizations realize it's not hard, it works, um, but they don't necessarily want to kind of let go of the reins. They're sort of scared about, well, what's going to happen if we let everybody work from home? Uh,
yeah.
so yeah, I guess, like, for me, I was just figuring out that I needed a different way to work for me, as
Yeah.
well as for my family situation. But on practical terms, I had to look at what I now call, with my clients, and it's always a place that I start with them, is what I call my kind of needs and non-negotiables. What are my priorities? And it's really practical things like, what is the minimum income I need to bring in? What sort of how does my work, how does my week look? So what kind of give is there if I'm in a situation where there's a lot of unpredictability? And that, I would say, characterizes the lives of a lot of the parents I work with, is the unpredictability. So if there's that kind of, I don't know, like I said to you before we started recording, both of my children are off school today, neither of them are in school today, so that happens. And that happens for a lot of the people I work with as well. And for me at the time, I was thinking, right, I need something that is going to work around that. So it's either an employer that is very flexible, or it could be some form of self-employment. And I've navigated myself lots of different forms of self-employment too. So that's kind of what I was figuring out. And I started doing a lot more. I had to manage how much school work I could do. So I worked several days in high schools to start with per week, but I quickly had to scale that back when my son was struggling more in school, and it became sort of 3 days to 2 days to 1 day. And in the meantime, I was doing something else, and I was trying to build up the online work that I was doing. So I was kind of navigating this. How does it look? What can I offer? The income that I need to bring in, the hours that I can work, managing my own, making sure I didn't go into burnout again, because I
Mm,
don't want to be there again,
yeah.
and knowing in myself, what I needed to do to make sure that that didn't happen. So it's not like there was kind of a magic bullet and one single answer,
Yeah.
and also knowing that it's always dynamic. The situation is always
Mm,
dynamic. People that I work with, their lives are always changing. So they have we've always kind of, I think, with neurodivergent families, or, families with young people that might have disabilities,
mm,
there's always a baseline of, it's more complex, it's a little more complicated, a bit more challenging than for other families. But what I also find, and it's the case for us too, is you can kind of get to this point where you hit a crisis. You hit a crisis, and then something has to shift. So I think whatever you sort of figure out in terms of work, you have to be able to be prepared to review it. It has to have a bit of give in the system so that you can feel confident that if you do hit a crisis, it will get, it can ride the bump with you, I suppose. Which is what led me to, what I'm doing now, which gives me obviously a lot more flexibility because I now have my own business. So my business is only a year old. The thing that started it, I would say, probably is when I was working in schools, without going into the stories of that too much, but one of the things that I did do was I followed up with young people who hadn't been able to attend school for all kinds of reasons and were not currently in school. And I would call them up as a careers advisor, contracted by the school to talk about their post-16 options. One time I got on the phone, so I'd be speaking to parents, and I was speaking to a parent, and I had a conversation with the young person the previous week, and I just thought I'll give the parent a call because I've noticed that this particular college that the young person was interested in was having an open day the following day. And I thought, I'm excited about this. It'll be so great for, let's say, Jamie. It's not Jamie, but let's say, it'll be great for Jamie to go to that open day, because it really makes such a difference to see the college in person, get a feel for what the staff are like, and, especially for young people who really struggled in school, just to see that college is a very different environment.
Yeah.
So I was trying to, I wanted to get on the phone thinking, let me see if I can encourage this parent to take this young person. And I started talking, my ADHD, I was talking, and then this parent said, can I interrupt you there for a moment, Helen? And I said, yeah, sure. And she said, look, I can't take Jamie to college tomorrow. And I thought, oh, that's a shame. But then she said, the reason is I have to appear in court because I have to, I'm being taken to court because of Jamie's school attendance. And I was just shocked, and I just thought, what is this? And it poured out, and she told me about everything that's been going on and the fines and how the school hadn't supported her or Jamie, and the just awful experience that she'd been through. And then she started talking about the impact on her job as well.
Yep.
Right. So she started saying, my job is on a knife edge right now. She was working in the health sector. She sort of pretty much used up all her sick leave. Her job wasn't very flexible because it was a frontline job that she was doing. And there's nothing much she could do about that. Unlike my position at university, which could have had, a lot more flex. And I just thought, hang on a minute. There's this was like the tip of that iceberg,
Yeah.
The whole world of parents, as I have discovered over the last couple of years, I suppose, of parents whose lives were so impacted by situations like that. So schools having a very draconian approach to school attendance, which then they're basically punishing, blaming parents.
Yeah.
At the same time, the parents are being squeezed at both ends. Parents have employers champing on the bit saying, why are you not here? As we were saying before, you can't just drop things at a moment's notice. Your boss only has so much patience. There's not enough flexibility. So the schools are putting pressure on the parents. I had a parent tell me that the school had given their child a part-time timetable where they expected their child to be in school for 1 hour every day, and the parent had to take them there. There was no transport. And the parent said, well, I can't do that because I've got my job. And the attendance officer, turned around to her and said, so you're putting your job before your child? And this is a single parent. So this is the kind of thing we're up against, you know. So that's why I feel, and I was going back to this idea of feeling passionate about what I do, there was this moment where the penny dropped and I just thought, I have a background here as a careers advisor, professional careers advisor. I have my level 7 qualification and masters in careers education and guidance. I've been doing this for a very long time. I've worked with adults, I've worked with young people at different stages. I have my own family situation of going through this, and I could say, you know, my children were in, you know, at this point when I was working in schools, they were in sort of year 3, year 5, and this neurodivergent journey we were discovering and the school challenges. I was working with students in schools who were in year 10, year 11, and I was just looking at it and thinking, this could be my future. Yeah, this could be where my family ends up if we don't get the support we need from the schools, you know. So I'm fighting that fight. But also if I don't get that work bit sorted out for myself too. And it just made me feel like really passionate about helping other parents, because I feel like, you know, there is a lot of focus on what's happening with young people in schools, and that's so important in its own right. It absolutely is, and we'll talk about that, won't we? But I just feel like the parents were being neglected. That piece is being neglected. You know, there's nobody out there that's saying, what about the careers of these parents? Because there's a lot
Well, exactly. How many other people do you know that do what you do, Helen? And why was I so excited when I was like, oh my gosh, you're there for us?
Yeah.
Because like as parents, you know, like you're doing your best for your child or whatever.
Yeah.
But like that feeling of turning yourself inside out for your child, what more can you do? But you still need money to survive. Like, but it's not even just about survival. Like being able to do a job you love.
Yes.
In the right environment. And there's something that was really been bubbling away as you've been talking about you leaving. It's almost like in this career soup of like, oh, I'm going to do in schools and I still love what I do, be it a Fiverr and all of that. And then sort of landing where you are now. And I'm sure things will grow and change and what have you, because like you say, it's dynamic. But I remember when my son was little, or like I had him really late, I think I was 42. This, and I think it's really, I can't think of the word, I can't use the word, but this idea of mumpreneurs, I think, is really demeaning, because I think it's women saying, this isn't working for me, I'm going to do my own thing and make it work for me. And it's not just mothers that are doing it and having to have, it was supposedly some kind of liberated mumpreneur thing, but actually why can't you just say women entrepreneurs? Why can't you just say, like, the career structure isn't working, so she's going to do her own thing to make it work for her, to earn the money that she needs to for her family.
Exactly.
And it's, you know, as you say, it's not peculiar to mothers, like in the work that you do. You know, both parents are impacted by it. But definitely, you know, the mothers being the first port of call from school, dropping everything and having to go, that's a conversation that is had over and over again within households. Like I live in an area where we've got lots of hospitals, and both parents are doctors. One's an A&E doctor and one isn't. So you can't call the A&E doctor who happens to be the mother. You've got to call the father. And they had to think to tell school, because the deferred usual thing was to call the mum. And I said, oh, I need to make a T-shirt, the mother. Like, you know, when I'm even going to pick up, you know, the meds and stuff, we have to show your passport. I'm not going to illegally deal in ADHD drugs, or meds, drugs, meds, whatever. But but the necessity, but part of me is, the world over, people have to find ways of making money that works for them.
Yeah.
And we've got lots of established institutions in UK. There's less of more so now, but there's kind of less of an entrepreneurial culture. And I came across a term, apparently it's an Australian, New Zealand term, tall poppies or something, where they go like, no, you need to be equal.
Yeah.
Don't raise your head above the pulpit doing something different. You need to have this equity amongst people. So it's almost even a bigger thing about relationship with money and what you do to earn the money to provide for your family. And it's kind of like, when you've got neurodivergence, that there's just more awareness in our generation now about neurodivergence, and not hiding children away or coming. There's so much more voice for neurodivergent community than when we were children, when we didn't get our diagnosis until we were much later in life.
Yeah.
So there's more of a voice for it. There's more of an understanding of it. It is like you said, with schools, it is not the same for every parent, even within the same school. How you're able to advocate for your child and your family's needs is massive as well. But in terms of what you do to earn your money is massive.
Yeah.
And it's not just about being educated or trained in your skill set to do the job you do. It's more than that. And when you're down, say, a traditional part, let's say like the couple that are both doctors, they've both invested an enormous amount in education and in their careers. But when your child is not coping in school, how do you do what you do? How do you stay?
Yeah.
You talked about the I'm going to put Jamie, the Jamie case study, whose parent is a frontline healthcare worker,
Yeah.
can't work from home.
No.
So what do you do? How do you do it? But I
Yeah.
do think there's more voice. And when
Yeah.
there's more voice, there's a more potential for change.
Yeah. No,
So
definitely.
so like, when you're working with clients, how do you work with clients, Helen? Is it
Yeah.
one-to-one or in a group? How?
So there's at the moment I do a few things. So I have like online resources, but directly how I support people is mainly one-to-one. Yes, mainly one-to-one. So I will always have a chat with somebody to see if what I offer is right. So I'll never, just go straight into it, because actually the first question I ask is really to try and establish whether somebody is in the right place to be thinking about work right now. And there's some people that aren't. And ethically, this is very important to me. There are some people that are at the point where, yes, their brain is going, I want to work, I need to work. But actually, they really need to focus fully on their situation, because they maybe are in crisis, or they are in burnout, or the child is in burnout. So try to establish that first, actually. And then, if they are in a position to be thinking about work, I'll say a little bit about what I do. But the two, which is, again, what we talked about before I came on the recording, the two types of people that I tend to work with, I suppose, are, parents that have already, or carers that have already taken some time out of work. So they already hit a point where they realise that they can't work, or they just needed to focus on family. So their child maybe come out of the education system altogether, and they were, maybe home educating, or the child was in burnout and they were going to try and get through that period, or parents where the children have very complex needs.
Yeah.
But maybe, you know, so there's a client whose child has gone into adult residential care. So she's been a full-time carer, but then her child has grown up and gone into adult residential care. So she's now coming back to a career after taking some time out. So there's sort of, I suppose, those career gappers, career returners. And then the other group that I tend to work with is parents who are, I call it, hanging on to their jobs by their fingernails. So they're in a job, probably, you know, might be in a professional job or some kind of job like the frontline parent I was talking about. So that kind of parent where they're in a job, but it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. Their boss is starting to get, you know, lose their patience. They're moving into, you know, performance management territory, this kind of thing. They've taken sick leave and they've used up sick leave. And they're getting, you know, they're getting into burnout territory themselves.
Yep.
The child might be in crisis, but they do need to do something, and they are in a position to do something, but they need something. So what I tend to do is say, you know, map out what I said that I did for myself is those needs and non-negotiables when I'm working with somebody, is say, all right, because when I was working with young people, or when I was working with, say, executives in America, I would always go into this kind of, you know, what are your skills and what your, you know, what's your experience and what are your values and motivations, and look at preferred work environment and all those lovely things about yourself that will help you figure out your next steps. But for the parents that I work with, I start with the kind of almost the limitations, which sounds really negative, but I believe that's where you have to start.
Yep.
I believe you do have to think about how much money you need to bring in, right? Because we're talking about that. I believe you do have to think about what's realistic in terms of the hours you can do, or whether you need to work fully from home, or whether you could do hybrid, or, you know, some face-to-face, maybe you've got some childcare cover on particular days or things like that. And when we've done that, we then go and look at what your skills, you know, what's your experience. And very much I focus on the skills and really incredibly valuable skills that people get from the parenting as well, and from things like battling with the education system, writing the HCP, sitting in the, you know, the multi-professional meetings and advocating for their child, and all of that, all of those skills that are so transferable to the job, but often parents don't necessarily recognize that they are transferable. If they do, communicating it to an employer, potential employer, is another level, isn't it? And we talk a lot about confidence as well, because confidence is often really diminished, I suppose, from the
very bruised, often
very bruised. It's a good word.
And it's also like their voices have not been heard until it's in crisis.
Yeah.
I've witnessed that, I've experienced it, or that the child's in crisis. You're kind of handling it at home. Oh, it's just my child, before you recognise all the other stuff. That
so much parent blaming, and I think they feel like they're failing at both. They're failing at, you know, creating, like, actually their child being able to access education. They're failing at work as they see it, but actually they're not. They're being failed by the system. They're being failed by inflexible employers. So some of it is really about, like, you know, me listening and saying and validating, but also giving them some kind of practical support and a way forward. So that's kind of what I do. And then we explore that whole flexible job market. So we do the self bit, we explore the whole flexible job market. So we kind of, you know, we look at, the self-employment versus the employment and different types, and what is going to fit with those needs and non-negotiables and with their skills and with their experience. And actually, it's really interesting, because a lot of people do think, oh, it has to be self-employment because you need that ultimate flexibility. I'm sort of ambivalent on this, because self-employment has an awful lot of challenges, doesn't it? It can also be very expensive.
Yes.
It's sort of a road which there's no sort of clear path to, you know, you have to navigate all of that yourself. And if if your spoons are low, you don't have many spoons, your time and energy is very limited, you might not have that much to give to something like starting a business.
Yeah.
So I do look at both, and I don't think there are many people that do, because there are a lot of business coaches that'll say, "Oh, I'll help you start a
Yeah.
business." But I come before that stage and say, "But let's look actually at the whole picture of you and your
Absolutely.
situation and your skills and your experience and what you want to do and how comfortable you are with risk as well. All of that comes into
That's,
it.
that's
And what path is right for you." And then we start to work on what is a clear path. And I go right to the point of, doing that kind of job search, coming up with a job search strategy, if it's job search or self-employment, plan, and putting in the steps and things like, CVs and interviews. So I have that background as well, so I can help with all of the practical things. So I suppose that's my very long-winded ADHD answer to how do I work with people.
but I think you touched on something really, really important there. It isn't that you have to leave employment and do your own thing. I mean, I can think of
Yeah,
entrepreneurs that are in burnout right now.
absolutely.
And it's, when you're an entrepreneur, you're doing your own thing, in theory, for flexibility.
Yeah,
I can just think of LinkedIn where people have said, but it's almost, it's when you're doing your own thing, it's more vocational, it's 24/7, and kids saying to their parents, but you're the boss, you get to decide when
yeah,
you have holidays. But the mindset, it can be so all consuming,
yeah,
particularly if you're neurodivergent and driven by passion. You're going full on.
yeah,
So I think that's really, like I say, you're so unique in being able to, okay, let's get the big picture here. And where are you in terms of risk?
yeah,
What do you need? As it doesn't even sound like a minimum, it's what do you need as a family to work for you?
mm, mm,
And that could be, like you said, hybrid. It might be that they've got different days off. But the other thing that comes to mind, and particularly if anyone's like an employer and thinking, well, this is all very well, and particularly say if we stay in entrepreneur land where there's a higher risk with employing people,
yeah,
but how do I run my business flexibly and still do my business
yeah,
and support the people I work with? And then I just think, at a broader sense, in terms of the cost to our economy, with all
mhm,
these people with varying skill
yeah,
sets
absolutely.
across the educational spectrum, like
Yeah,
we said earlier, like a person is a person. It doesn't matter what they do. They hold value in themselves, whatever the job they're doing.
yeah,
And being finance, instead of having to rely on being, there's that exchange, there's that energetic exchange for being
yeah,
paid for the
mhm,
work you do, that feels important somehow energetically,
yeah,
whatever the job it is, whatever you are doing.
yeah,
And I can think of some of the jobs that I've done that I've really enjoyed, but just have not had enough in terms of income. And how do you make it all work when you've got
yeah,
dependents,
yeah,
and
exactly.
just like, your children, the way they're watching you, if you're stressed financially, the impact it then has
Yes.
on the whole family, the interactions between parent and child,
Yeah,
the strain on the marriage relationship or the partnership, that
absolutely.
is huge. It's
Oh,
huge. and i
it really
and
is.
I really say it, like, separately in the work that I do with people, money and time are so sacred. They
Yeah.
define our human experience, our relationship with them.
Mhm, mhm.
And I, yeah, they it's such a challenge. It's such a challenge. And when I think, you're in a job, you've got your children, you're providing from it for them, but health and well-being and their needs,
Exactly.
it's like you have to down tools.
Yes, exactly. That's why I always start with that question at the beginning, because, there are people that we ultimately agree that now is not the right time, and it's not ethical for me to kind of start working with that person, taking their money, but also giving them a false idea that work is possible that won't burn them out in the situation that they're in, and it's really difficult. And that's why I also write and feel very passionately about the government looking at things like welfare cuts at the moment, because it's the ultimate safety net for families. And things like DLA, for example, disability living allowance, things like PIP for adults. PIP is something that actually allows people to work.
Okay.
And this is something I feel very strongly about.
So not everybody will know what PIP is. So do you want to?
Sorry, personal independence payment. So this is something that the government is arguing at the moment, and I don't know if your listeners are listening a year down the line. I'm hoping that this will all be fine. However, as we stand in July 2025, the government is making significant changes to the welfare and benefit system. Personal independence payments allow people to work, but the government, so that they allow people to get things like transport, or it might be things to support them while they're doing their job at home, so having people in helping them. So there are all kinds of situations where, for disabled people, they will need extra support in order to be able to do a job. What the government is arguing is that it stops people from working. So they're kind of ripping the rug out, and they're sort of telling a lie, really, to be able to do that. So I know that's not the purpose of this podcast. I do feel strongly about it, because I feel like a lot of people that I work with that want to work, but there are a lot of barriers in place for those people.
And I think this is really key where we've got to in this conversation. Everybody has a mixed experience with school and school support and, access for neurodivergent children. There is an awareness. But as you say, the missing piece is access to work for the parents of those children.
Yeah.
And at a really basic level, if just thinking of sectors where they're struggling with employment, I know if I just think of nursing, and the sort of how many people leave just because it's leave healthcare in UK, move countries to where it's better. But that's moving all into sort of very complex political land. When we're thinking about the parents of neurodivergent children whose careers are affected by supporting their child with that child's basic needs. And previously, it just has been hidden. It's just been hidden.
Yeah, exactly.
And the marginalized even more marginalized. Whereas if there is an economic cushion around parents, it's just hidden. So you're either more marginalized or you're very hidden.
Yeah.
Whereas there is this third way of the work that you do. So if there are other careers advisors out there, listen and look at what Helen is doing. She's just one person, but there's a huge need, isn't there? Huge need. And think, sorry, you were going to say.
Yeah, what I hope to do in the future is to be able to help, because obviously there's only so many people that I can help on a one-to-one.
Exactly.
So I'm hoping that, in the next few months, I'll be able to set up something that is group-based online, where I'll be able to offer something for, less than people pay me on a one-to-one, that's more affordable, because obviously I'm conscious that, the people I work with don't have unlimited funds to be able to get support, and I just want to make that as accessible as possible. And actually, I also have I do like monthly Zoom calls for free as well. So anybody, any parents can join those monthly support calls online to ask any questions about flexible work and current situation. Yeah, so
Put all of the information in below the video.
yeah,
And now seems like a good time to talk about your other free resources for people that
yeah,
we'll also put in the video description.
yeah,
Do you want to
yeah.
talk about?
So there's a couple of free guides I've got at the moment, and I'm always going to be developing more resources, and I'm going to develop hopefully a few more things over the summer as well. But the main one that I think people find really useful as a starting point is called my Finding Flexible Work in the UK guide. And that is specifically for parents and carers in neurodivergent and SEN disabled families. That because that is who I work with. Those are the people that I support. So everything I do is for that group, and it's all about. So it talks through some of the questions around the needs and non-negotiables. If you're trying to figure out where to start in terms of thinking about flexible work, what can I do? This is mostly the question that people come to me is, what can I do? What can I do? So that's the starting point. So I've got some of the questions in that free guide. Also to set out what kind of timeline you need to find flexible work. So, I often separate short term and long term. So if you need something right now, your job's unsustainable, but you really need something, what can you do in the short term? But then, longer term, you might be really thinking about a career change to something that is going to be more sustainable for you, that might require some retraining, potentially another qualification, but that might be a bit further down the line. So it talks about that a little bit. And then what it's also got in the guide is a curated list of flexible working job sites and resources where you can find flexible jobs, because what you often find, and people speak to me about this a lot, and I know that this is the case, is because the people I work with are very vulnerable. There are a lot of scammers out there. There are a lot of scam jobs. There are all kinds of things that are really dodgy. I actually had a text last week from something claiming that I could earn £800 a day, and all I need to do is register here on this. Well, obviously it's a scam, but there are some things that look quite credible out there. So I put together this list of reputable, flexible working job sites, and that's included. If people sign up for that, they would also join my mailing list. So I send out, like, every week, I've got a weekly newsletter with tips and resources about finding flexible work, and there's sort of follow-up emails about different themes, like the scam jobs, like self-employment versus employment, which is a really, really big thing for a lot of people to think about. Really. Also about, if you are in crisis and you need more flexibility in your job right now, what are your legal rights? So, you will get a series of follow-up emails on these different but important topics that, are kind of things that people ask me about a lot, basically. And then one more guide is the post-career break CV guides that I have. So for people that have taken a break, and this question I get so much is, well, what do I put on my CV if I've taken a break? How do I account for that gap? How do I articulate the transferable skills that I've got to an employer? How do I present that information in a positive way? So that guide is focused on that. And there are different types of CV as well, because there are different forms of CV, and what sort of structure is best if you are in that situation where you've taken a break. Because the people I work with, when you go online and you look for CVs for career breaks, mostly what you find is people that have taken a maternity leave or a few months or a gap year. They're not the people that I work with, who might have been out of work for 10 years, 15 years. I do work with people that have had really long career breaks. So it's focused on that. Those are two things.
And people can find you on LinkedIn.
Yes, I'm mainly on LinkedIn and Facebook. I dabbled in TikTok. That was not me. I had a dabble. So if you find me on TikTok, you're very welcome to go and have a laugh and watch those old videos. But yeah, no, mainly LinkedIn and Facebook, and you could put the links in for people.
Yeah. So what would be, as we come to a close, what would be your encouragement or advice to kind of the two kind of main people you work with? Somebody where it's really untenable right now and not sure what to do.
Yeah.
And then somebody on the other side thinking, how do I move forward with my career?
Yeah.
Coming back to it.
Yeah. So the career gap one that springs to mind immediately is I had a client recently who'd taken a 15-year career
Mhm.
break. And I'm not going to say what a profession was or anything like that, but she had a professional job, but she'd taken a really long career break to look after her child. She was in a situation where she was now able to work again, but she'd lost so much confidence. She wasn't sure what her skills were. She wasn't sure what she wanted to do. So, it takes some time to uncover all of that. But within a few months, she was able to get a really good job in a charity that was just right for her. So just to say that, you can go through this process, and that, because a lot of people think, oh, I've had this really long career break, it's just not going to be possible for me. So I wanted to give that example of hope to say, yes, it is. It
Mm.
absolutely is possible, because you haven't stopped learning things. You haven't stopped using your skills. The employer might talk about it as a career break or a career gap or whatever, but I almost I don't have another word for it, but I
Mm.
don't like to use that term, because your life continues and you never stop using skills. If you're sitting in
Mm.
a meeting with a Senko, or if you're, working on editing an EHCP, or all the things that you do, or if you're sitting with your child supporting them through a meltdown, you're using incredibly high level skills and you have so much to offer, and it's just about articulating that and figuring out what you want to do with that. So I think that's that group. And then the other group that's in that crisis right now and needs to find something, I think you've got to focus on where you are right now and what your short-term needs are. Don't worry about what's happening in a year, 2 years, because I think, especially if we're neurodivergent ourselves, we go into the catastrophizing mode and
Mm.
it feels all very unmanageable. So I tend to kind of focus people right down on where they are now. I'd always look, if you are in crisis and it is about the money and the job feels untenable, I do actually start to explore with people, are there things you can do in your current job? Is it really untenable? Have you had all the conversations you could have at work? Do you know your legal rights? Call ACAS, go on the Working Families website. These are organisations that can really help you. You can get like emergency leave as well. You have a legal entitlement to that, so make sure you've used all of that first. Then, if it really comes to finding something else and you need something in the short term, we can look at what can you do in the short term, and it could be things like agency work, or there might be things that they can do in the short term, but push that long term thing off for now, and then can look at that as well. So clients that I work with over a longer period, often what happens is they'll come to me with a short-term crisis and we'll do a little bit of work around that. And they come back to me again in 6 months and say, thank you for that. And now I'm ready to look at what I really want to do in the longer term, and something that's going to work for me and be really sustainable. And I'm interested in this thing, which is going to take, a year or two maybe to retrain for that. But so that's sometimes how I work with that group. Again, not short answer, Diana, but hopefully that's helpful.
Lovely. I was just thinking what an incredible, very much needed service you're providing,
Thank
and how that's been born, and just it's wonderful. It's just so needed, and hopefully somebody who's found this video can find all the links and reach out and connect with you and get the support they need, even if they just DM you on
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
absolutely. Yeah, I get DMs every day, LinkedIn, Facebook. I have got a links page which pulls everything together, so I can share that as well,
Yeah,
Diana.
and it'll all be in the description
Perfect.
here. So thank you so
Oh,
much, Helen, for
God, it's
making the
been
time and sharing your story of how you got to where you are now, and just being there for us, the parents of neurodivergent children, and that there are many ways to earn money, use your skill set. And and I think that's something really important. You don't, like with you said with your 15-year gap thinking, right, I've got to go back and do a job that I'm overqualified for because I've had that gap. And that does not have to be the case at all. You've got skills. You don't stop learning. I think that's really important thing to remember. Life has not been put on hold because you're not in formal employment. You are still growing, learning.
Yeah.
You're still you with all those skills and abilities, and you're developing a whole bunch of, like you say, valuable skill set that you may not be fully aware of. So connect with Helen if you need this help.
Come find me. Thank you so much, Diana. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it's been so great to connect. I hope this conversation with Helen has afforded you the space to breathe, to feel seen, and to know that the amount of emotional labour involved in raising neurodivergent children, especially if you're navigating a later in life diagnosis yourself, it's not yours to carry alone. For me, the key takeaway is begin right where you are with what you have and with the wiring you're working with today. So if anything in this episode has resonated and you're wondering how to build a life that feels more workable for you, your own mind and your own circumstances, I'd love to extend an invitation to you to Wonderland. Wonderland's a coaching program I've created for adults with ADHD and or autism, or those exploring their neurodivergence, who want to support your own needs with where you actually are and not where you think you should be. You'll find a link in the comments below. And if this episode was helpful, please like, comment, share, follow Even the Dog Has ADHD, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, I would love it if you would leave a review, because it really helps so that somebody else who may need to hear this episode is more likely to hear it. So in the meantime, Even the Dog Has ADHD. There's never just one, because apples don't fall far from trees. Bye.